Welcome to On The Moneyline, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC 319, which goes down this weekend, a pay-per-view. It's stacked. We've got a championship fight as well, one of the best championship fights that we've had this year, and probably, when all's said and done at the end of 2025, probably one of the most intriguing that we've had for the entire year as well. It's a really good card, coming off the back of two Apex cards as well. It's going to be nice to have a crowd in the arena. And just quickly touching on that last card last weekend, a phenomenal card, by the way, which, again, I say this time and time again, what may not look that great on paper can turn into an absolutely outstanding event. And I even said on last week's podcast, like, it was one of the most difficult UFC events from a betting perspective that I can remember seeing in the 10 plus years that I've been doing this, and we still came out with profit. You know, from my perspective, the pro handicapper side of what we do at MMA Play 365, I'm on a 5 or 6 event win streak right now. Baze AI is absolutely hammering everything as well, and although myself and Baze AI never always agree with some of the fights, we both end up smashing the majority of the events that we take part in and play in, which, you know, from our perspective is every UFC event. So yeah, everything's going really well right now in regards to results from both sides, the AI and the handicapper side. And that leads me right into the quick promo before we get into breaking the fights down. And if you do want to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, whether you are a long-term gambler that likes full written breakdown so you can understand why we're recommending the plays that we are, then we've got that section for you. If you're somebody that just wants to tail a professional handicapper, put absolutely zero effort into research or anything else, then we've got an official bet section which tells you exactly where the professional handicapper, which is myself, where my money is going on that specific event. And if you're somebody that doesn't like the long-term game so much, you just like the fun side of it, you're a fun gambler, you like the parlays, you want to build your own parlays, or maybe, again, you don't want to put any effort in and you want the pre-built parlay option, we have a fun gambler section for you. And then, of course, every betting subscription comes with Baze AI from our UFC prediction software, which gives you a percentage prediction for every possible outcome of every UFC fight every single weekend, on a heater as well, absolutely firing right now. And you get both the Baze AI and the professional handicapper betting advice in one subscription. We don't separate the two. And of course, all of our subscriptions are super affordable, as our ethos is we want you to make your money back as quickly as you possibly can that you've spent with us, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. So that's all at MMAplay365.com. And with the introduction out the way, with the promo out of the way, let's get down to breaking some fights down. And of course, as always, we're going to start with that main event. 5 rounds for the UFC middleweight championship. We've got the current champion Dricus Du Plessis versus Khamzat Chimaev. Now, I feel like it's been a long time coming for Chimaev. I actually called this, I think, before he even had his first fight in the UFC. I met Khamzat years and years ago in Sweden before he was a UFC fighter, and I had people saying, look, you know, watch this kid. He's coming through right now on their regional scene, and he's going to hit the UFC at some point, and, you know, he's going to cause a bit of a storm in the UFC. And that's exactly what he's been doing. And the skill set and the quality of Chimaev is just unbelievable. Like, look at what he did to Robert Whittaker in his last fight. Now, bear in mind, the one thing I will say about that is I was very shocked at the time. Like, I think I actually took a stab on Robert Whittaker from a betting perspective as well. I think if I remember rightly, I put something small on him. Just like, it's nothing against Khamzat Chimaev. I actually called Chimaev to be a champion, be a UFC champion, along with Magomed Ankalaev, which rung true, along with Islam Makhachev. That was before Makhachev was even ranked in the UFC. People laughed at me for that. So I called those three. I called Ankalaev, Islam Makhachev, and Khamzat Chimaev all future UFC champions, and this is the last one of the 3. So it wasn't anything against Chimaev. I just thought with Robert Whittaker, he's got the defensive wrestling and grappling ability to remain safe early where Chimaev's most dangerous, weather a storm, and then the longer the fight goes on, because that was a 5-round fight as well, I thought if Whittaker can get Chimaev going late in this fight, then he's going to take over, because Chimaev does slow down in every fight that he fights after round 2. And that's not slowed down as like he's got his hands on his hips and he can't perform. It just means that he's just not as effective and as efficient after round 2 as he is earlier on in the fight. And, I believe that's a fact. So I thought Whittaker had that opportunity to survive a storm, take Chimaev into deep waters and beat him. But, man, what Chimaev actually did to Whittaker early in that fight is just disgusting. I believe he broke his jaw. Whittaker's teeth were misaligned, needed massive dental work on them. And it was just from that squeeze that he had on Whittaker's face, and it's scary power and scary ability to do something like that to Robert Whittaker. However, on the flip side of that, what we've seen from Whittaker since, I just think that Whittaker was probably on a decline that we didn't know about at the time. And look, that's not disrespectful to say. It happens to every professional fighter. You're not going to be in your prime forever. You're going to take that dip and decline. And Robert Whittaker's one of the best middleweights of all time, not just in the UFC, but in MMA in general. And, he's been in and around the top for years and years, performing at an elite level for years and years. And, that dip and that decline is going to come. And I kind of feel after what we saw with, the Derrida fight last time out, I just feel that that's a fight that Robert Whittaker would have absolutely cruised to a victory 3 years ago. And it kind of just isn't there right now. And, some people might say, oh, well, it's Khamzat Chimaev that's caused that decline. I don't believe that. I think that looking at where Whittaker is right now, I think the decline was before the Chimaev fight. It's just we didn't know about it. And the Chimaev fight was kind of masked because of how good he is. And yeah, look, I'm digressing here with the whole Whittaker thing. But yeah, look, I took that shot on Whittaker last time. And I feel like Du Plessis has got that same path to victory here. Weather a storm, take Chimaev late, drown him in the later rounds. Du Plessis got a good gas tank. He can go and go and go all day long. He's super awkward to fight. He's an outstanding striker. He's got underrated wrestling. His submission grappling game is very good as well. And not only all this, he's a physically massive middleweight. Whereas with Chimaev, I think Chimaev does give up a little bit of size for middleweight in general against some opponents. And specifically this opponent with Du Plessis. I think Chimaev's more of a natural professional welterweight. However, I do respect the fact that he fights at middleweight because he doesn't want that damaging weight cut for his entire career. And again, I respect that. But is he going to be able to ragdoll somebody as big and physically strong as Du Plessis? And not only that, like I say, Du Plessis, got a world-class skill set as well. So it's just a very intriguing fight because I think from an outright mixed martial artist, I think Du Plessis is the better mixed martial artist, and especially over 5 rounds as well. I think that suits him much better than it does Chimaev. But Chimaev has just got that ultra dangerous early game set in the second round, I would say. Du Plessis is going to absolutely weather a storm. We know what Chimaev's going to do. He's going to come out, throw some hard punches, look to take Du Plessis down, rag him around a bit, start threatening chokes, and then hit him with a big squeeze, exactly what he did to Whittaker. But I just don't think Du Plessis is where Whittaker was at in the Chimaev fight right now in his own career. Du Plessis isn't absolutely in his prime. He's fighting. He's a world-class fighter. He's elite. He's a legitimate champion. And I'm just not sure Chimaev is going to do to Du Plessis what he did to Whittaker to that extent. I do think Du Plessis is gonna drop a round, maybe 2 rounds in this fight. I do think he's gonna have to weather a storm. I do think he's gonna get taken down. And I do think Chimaev's gonna do some good work. But as long as Du Plessis is making him work for the takedowns, standing back up, making Chimaev put him back down again, just slowly touching at that gas tank of Chimaev, if he survives that round and a half, maybe 2 full rounds, I do think that once Chimaev slows down, Du Plessis is going to be able to take over the fight, unless he's super hurt and something's happened. But it's just a really, really intriguing fight to the point of you've got Chimaev, who's an absolute monster, versus Du Plessis, who's so awkwardly brilliant. It's an amazing fight to make, and one that I think is, again, I just don't feel that anybody can be sold and completely confident in either side here. And then look, it's a betting podcast. You look at the line from a betting perspective. You've got Chimaev that's around a -200 favourite. Du Plessis, like I say, that elite champion who is a legitimate champion in his prime, awkward skill set, very good everywhere, at +170, +180. I think the line's off. I think it should be shorter. But with that being said, if Chimaev goes into this fight, or if Chimaev, opens up at like minus 125, he'll just get absolutely steamed back up to minus 200 anyway. We'd probably be a part of that. So, again, it's just a super interesting fight. One that I'm just not that confident in either side, but from a betting perspective, if you're wanting to play money on this fight, I'd be saying, look, in this scenario, take the underdog, because it's there's so many question marks in this fight, and you've got a relatively sized underdog. That's usually the side to take in these specific fights. So with that in mind, from a straight pick and prediction perspective, I'm going to follow that guide. I'm picking Dricus Du Plessis to win this fight and still the UFC middleweight champion. And in the next fight, in the co-main event, another intriguing fight. It follows. It's an amazing fight as well. We've got Lerone Murphy versus Aaron Pico making his UFC debut from the Bellator/PFL banner. And my only complaint with this fight is I wish it was a featured co-main event with it being 5 rounds, and it's not. It's only 3 rounds. I'd love to see 5 rounds of this. Really, really would. But look, again, we've got another situation where we've got a solidified, legit UFC fighter welcoming a fighter from that Bellator/PFL brand. And look, like, the UFC guys are catching back up. Like, when the first time we really had this, or at least the time where I noticed it the most, was Michael Chandler versus Dan Hooker. And Chandler beat Hooker, so that was 1-0 to the Bellator side. And then we had Michael Venom Page come in from Bellator to fight Kevin Holland. Michael Venom Page dominated Holland, won relatively comfortable, 2-0 to Bellator. So you're thinking, well, actually, all this UFC experience, like, these are legitimate fighters that are coming over from Bellator and just needed the stage to prove it. But then you have Pitbull coming in from Bellator, one of Bellator's legends. And Pitbull fought Yair Rodriguez, lost comfortably. So, now we're 2-1 to Bellator. And then we have Patchy Mix coming in against Mario Bautista. And Patchy Mix, absolutely hyped, one of the best grapplers on the planet within MMA. And, everything's there. Like, we love Patchy Mix here. I love Patchy Mix. And Mario Bautista comfortably beat him. So now it's 2-2. The UFC fighters are picking this up. So the one thing, and the reason why I mentioned this is, I wouldn't, it's going to be recency bias for anyone to say, oh, these guys coming over from Bellator, they just can't do it, they're getting beat every time. Well, they're not. I've just named 4 fights there, and it's 2-2. So I don't put any stock into, or much stock into, the fact that these Bellator fighters are coming over and they just can't keep up with the UFC guys, because MVP did and Michael Chandler did. So yeah, that's just that side out. But from this fight perspective, Aaron Pico is, again, another one of these massively hyped guys that's coming from, that Bellator PFL banner. Great boxing. He's got a wrestling background, blends the boxing and the wrestling together really well. He's a fighter that I believe the UFC have loved for quite a while, and have finally been able to get his hands on him. And they're putting him in against Lerone Murphy. Now, Lerone Murphy is 16-0 as a professional. Of course, he's got that one draw, which was his UFC debut in, I can't remember what country. I think it was Abu Dhabi against Takugov. It was a really, really tough opening fight for him that he ended up, claiming a draw in that fight. Like I said, it was a super good result for him, and he was a massive, massive underdog in that fight as well. So since then, Murphy's done nothing but win. And he's done nothing but win throughout his entire career. He's a legitimate fighter that, recently has been fighting at the top of the UFC. There's people talking about a couple more fights. He's going to be in and around that title shot. And that's no joke. Being in and around a UFC title fight proves that you are at an elite level in your chosen sport, in this case in MMA. So Lerone Murphy is not going to be an easy fight for Aaron Pico. And actually, you look at the records. Yeah, Aaron Pico's took a few losses, and the losses have been against, pretty good fighters. But the wins that Pico's had, I'm just not overly impressed with that level of competition that he's been beaten. The level of competition he's been losing against, yeah, hands up, fair enough. He's been losing against some good guys. But guess what? Lerone Murphy's one of these good guys as well, with the UFC experience, with fighting at the top of the sport. And it's the one thing that I feel that is going to go against Murphy in this fight is the takedown defense. So I think his takedown defense statistic is about 52%, which actually isn't that bad. Anything over 50% is okay. But against a legitimate wrestler, it could be exploited. Now, with Lerone Murphy, he's had 9 UFC fights and he's been taken down in 6 of them. Conceded around 20, 22 takedowns in those 6 fights that he's been taken down in. So that number sounds absolutely horrific. But the thing is, Murphy's been winning all these fights. Like I said, he's unbeaten. Nobody's beaten him in professional mixed martial arts. So it then begs the question of, why is Murphy winning these fights where he's getting taken down multiple times in? Well, that's because he's been able to get back up to his feet, been able to land good strikes, defend some takedowns along the way as well, make his opponent work. Just like what I said, in the last fight with Du Plessis, what he's going to have to do with Chimaev, just make him work. That's what Murphy does. He's got a good gas tank, good cardio. And when he's getting taken down, he's not laying flat on his back and wasting minutes on his back. He's getting right back up to his feet. And then from a judge's perspective, things have shifted over the last sort of 5 years. Nowadays, judges are seeing, if a takedown happens and a takedown occurs and there's no, sort of advancing grappling or ground and pound and the opponent gets right back up to the feet, they're just seeing it as a change of position and not really scoring it too highly. And then Murphy's going out there and putting some good work from a striking perspective, and that's what the judges are scoring. So again, does that happen in this fight? Pico gets takedowns. I think he's going to. I do think Murphy's definitely going to get taken down multiple times in this fight. But I trust Murphy to get back up to his feet because that's what he's shown us he can do at the highest level of the sport, which is the UFC. So I think that Pico is going to have to play boxing quite a bit as well if he's going to have to win this fight. And from a striking perspective, I think the striking is very close between the two. But again, I'm putting more trust in the UFC experienced fighter that's been fighting, really good strikers and also strikers with super heavy hands as well. So when I'm looking at this fight, I'm kind of thinking, well, yeah, look, Pico's going to get the takedowns. But historically, Murphy's shown us that he can get back up to his feet. And then historically, he's also shown that he's a very good striker and has been mixing it with some world-class strikers in the UFC as well. And Pico historically loses against the best opponents. And I think Lerone Murphy can be put in that category. So I am leaning towards Lerone Murphy here. I think Pico is a very skilled fighter, super well-rounded in regards to the boxing and wrestling. Like I said, blends it together really well. But I just think he's being given a real tough fight here stylistically against someone like Murphy. So for those reasons, I'm picking Lerone Murphy to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Neal versus Carlos Prates. Now, Prates back in the cage very quickly after that loss to Ian Garry, and I think he does the right thing, to be honest. It was a very strange fight from Prates' perspective because, look, I was on the side of Ian Garry. I thought Ian Garry was going to absolutely school him, which he did for the majority of the fight, but the last 2 rounds, Prates just seemed to, I don't think Garry was overly getting tired. He wasn't being made to work too much in the early moments of that fight. But Prates just seemed to, wake up way too late in the fight. And when he started putting it on Ian Garry, we saw the level that Prates is at. He's at a very high level. And it just begs the question of, why didn't he do any of that early in the fight? I mean, again, pick your poison. If you're worried about your gas tank, and it's the first 5 rounds fight that you fought in the UFC at this level, Prates was maybe thinking, look, he's a smoker as well. That's definitely gonna play a factor. I don't care what anybody says. So from that gas tank, cardio, energy perspective, I think Prates was very concerned of, look, does he go hard early and fade late, or does he bide his time early and go hard late? And he picked the latter. Maybe he could have gone, because all he would have needed to do is probably do three good rounds and not get finished. And yeah, it was just a very strange fight. Garry looked in trouble late in that fight, but the early moments he absolutely was schooling Prates. But Neal, with Neal, it's a different type of opponent here for Prates. I don't think Neal is the type of fighter that's going to school Prates like Ian Garry did. I think Prates is probably going to be the one that, sets the pace of the fight, gets his volume up, really starts putting it on Neal. The one thing Prates has got to watch out for in this fight that probably wasn't as sort of prominent in that fight against Garry is the power coming back from Neal. Neal has got legitimate power legitimate knockout power, one-punch knockout power, whereas although Gary can obviously, finish fighters via knockout, he's not got that sort of prominent power that Neal's got, the dangerous power, one-punch power that Neal's got. So that's definitely something that Prates has got to take into consideration in this fight. Got to mind his P's and Q's, but outside of that, I think Prates has got a good fight here to get back in the win column and also put a good name on his record again as well. I think Prates is going to do a really good job here of just mixing shots to the body, to the head. If Neal comes forwards, I think Prates is going to meet him with some power, and Prates has got that. He's one of those fighters with that deceptive power in the straight punches. And I think as Neal's coming forwards trying to land something himself, I think Prates is going to be very long here. He's going to hit him with straight punches down the middle. He's going to sort of either stop Neal in his tracks, or get the respect there quite early, and then Neal's sort of like maybe on the back foot a little bit. And once Prates gets Neal on the back foot again, he does such a good job of ripping to the body, ripping to the head, and mixing things up from that perspective. And I ultimately think that's just what's going to happen. I think Prates is going to chip away. Again, early in the first round, Prates got to watch that power from Neal, but the more he chips away, I think eventually, he's going to stop Neal late in this fight. So yeah, for those reasons, I'm picking Carlos Prates to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jared Cannonier versus Michael Venom Page. Like, MVP is a fighter that, look, you can tell, go back to all the podcasts that I've done since he's been in the UFC. I love this guy. Cashed him as an underdog against Shara Bullet. Cashed him as an underdog against Kevin Holland. And look, he's a fighter that I've cashed on multiple times. Really like him. He almost did it against Ian Gary as well. Like, that wasn't a million miles off, but bad stylistic fight. Whereas this fight, when we talk about stylistically, Jared Cannonier is a good fight stylistically for Michael Venom Page. Like, Cannonier can hit takedowns, and he does hit takedowns, but I don't think that he's going to be more effective than an Ian Gary, for example, that is going to be able to get MVP down and keep him down. So look, I'll never ever, and I say this all the time, I'll never ever say never to a fighter getting taken down or a fighter hitting a takedown in a fight, because all it takes is a misstep, off balance, good entry into a double leg, and the takedown's going to happen. What I'm more concerned about, and what I put more of a factor onto, is can that fighter that hits the takedown keep the opponent down, because that's the main thing. I explained that a few minutes ago with Lerone Murphy and Aaron Pico. Like, if the fighter who gets the takedown doesn't do any advancing with the grappling or hit any good ground and pound, and the opponent stands back up to the feet, well, the takedown's almost worthless from a judge's perspective. So if Cannonier takes down MVP, which I think he might do in this fight, because I just don't see Cannonier standing with MVP the entire fight, I just don't know whether he can hold MVP down the way that Ian Gary held MVP down by slick grappling, putting a hook in, just causing a bit of chaos from when MVP was standing up to sort of block transitions and block the defensive work that MVP was doing. And I don't think Cannonier is going to do that. And then from a striking perspective, which is where I think the fight's won and lost, like, yes, MVP has got to mind his P's and Q's. Cannonier hits like a fucking truck, and MVP has got to be aware of that and got to, really be careful in this fight. But man, MVP's elite striking, like, super tall, super long, super rangy. The speed is still out of this world. Like, what he sees as well, like, he seems, from a striking perspective, this is where he's good, this is where he's elite and world class, and he just sees things that others don't, and he sees things very early on. So actually being caught by Cannonier, although possible, seems a bit of a stretch. And I just think the fight, like I say, if Cannonier's hitting takedowns, I think MVP will stand back up and then just put work on Cannonier. And I think essentially that's how the fight's going to play out. I think Cannonier's going to fall behind from a striking perspective. I think he's going to be trying to close MVP down constantly, trying to cut him off. And that's just playing into MVP's game. MVP is, he loves being on that back foot and, drawing his opponent in, landing, then circling back out into space, and his opponent's got to close distance again and keep coming forwards, and then MVP will do the same thing. He'll strike, exit out of range, back into the centre, and all it does is cause a lot of frustration and causes the opponent to overwork in the fights. And look, Cannonier is he is a world-class fighter in the UFC, but like I say, I just feel that this fight is going to be won and lost from a striking perspective. I don't think Cannonier is going to take MVP down consistently and then keep him down for 1 minute, 2 minutes at a time. So because of that, the fight should be scored if it's gone to a decision, from that striking perspective, if it doesn't go to a decision, I think it'll be a knockout, and then the knockout is going to be more likely from the elite striker, and again, that's MVP as well. So look, if I watch this fight and Cannonier lands a bomb on MVP and knocks him out, I'm not going to be overly shocked, but I just think the fight's going to be based on much more than Cannonier just landing one shot to knock MVP out. And I just think MVP is an elite striker. He's going to have a striking advantage, speed advantage, movement advantage, volume advantage. I just think it's going to be tough for Cannonier. So for those reasons, I'm picking Michael Venom Page to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tim Elliott versus Kai Asakura. Now, I can't help thinking in this fight, the UFC are saying thank you to Kai Asakura for stepping in on your UFC debut to fight Alexandre Pantoja, who is the best flyweight on planet Earth right now, and in the conversation of one of the best flyweights of all time. The current champion still, absolutely wiping everybody out, and also wiped Kai Asakura out as well pretty quickly. And to be fair to Pantoja, like, he did expose Kai Asakura on the mat. Like, that's where Asakura is definitely weakest, but also, like, Pantoja's elite with his wrestling and grappling, and clearly the best in the division. So it's kind of like, well, how exposed is Asakura, because Pantoja does this to pretty much everybody? And that's a big question. Like, there'll be a lot of people that I think will be saying, look, Tim Elliott, he can replicate what Pantoja's done. He can get the takedowns. He can get on top of Asakura and look to submit him and do exactly what Pantoja did. But I ain't putting too much stock into that, because by saying that, you're putting Tim Elliott on the same level as Pantoja, and the same level from a wrestling and grappling perspective, and that could not be further from the truth. And again, look, I'm not going to say Tim Elliott can't take Kai Asakura down, because I'm sure he will, and I'm sure that's the game plan, and I'm sure Tim Elliott will have moments in this fight, but I just think Asakura's got a step down in competition here massively, and I think that although he did get exposed from that wrestling and grappling by Pantoja, like I said, it's Pantoja and Elliott's not Pantoja. So I am thinking here that Kai Asakura, if he is taken down, can get back up to his feet before Elliott starts doing too much damage in regards to control or submission attempts. And then on the feet, I think the striking is just miles apart here. I think Asakura is such a better striker, sharper, quicker, more power. I think he's more in his prime. He's going to be fresher, faster, better mover. And even that, what I've just said, the fact that he's going to be quicker and a better mover on the feet, that's going to make the takedowns from Tim Elliott a little bit harder as well, because Elliott's going to have to find the right entry into the takedown, then he's got to complete it and then keep him down. And I just think even finding that entry, because of the speed and movement of Asakura, is going to be very difficult. What I think is going to happen here is I do think Elliott's going to get an early takedown. I think Asakura is going to stand back up pretty quickly afterwards, and then Elliott's going to think, okay, right, this is going to be a struggle keeping him down, and just maybe, right, the way that I win is spam takedowns. But the thing is, every time Elliott closes the distance to shoot a takedown, I think Asakura is going to be landing hard shots on him, sniper shots, super accurate, with that deceptive power that he's got as well. And I think he's going to knock Tim Elliott out. So for those reasons, I'm picking Kai Asakura to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got King Green versus Diego Ferreira. And this is an interesting fight. Like, I'm a bit surprised that Diego Ferreira is like a solidified favourite in this fight. I did think the line would be much closer, because, look, King Green is clearly not in his prime anymore, and, he is on that decline process of his career. But, like, this is a decline process when he's fighting the best of the best in the division, which is not going to be that competitive as he used to be. But against Diego Ferreira, like, Diego Ferreira's got an elite skill set. Like, you can't knock that. Like, he's a very good fighter, but he's also an aging fighter himself. He's also a fighter that's also not at the top of the division like King Green. And Ferreira, again, a number of years ago, would have been able to compete with those fighters at the top of the division. So what I'm basically saying is, I kind of feel like they're both in the same boat and at the same stage of the career. And it was just a little bit surprising to see the lines that the line that is a little bit too wide, in my opinion. But again, when you look at a fighter, if one of these fighters does have a dominant win, then I do see that being more likely to be Ferreira than King Green. So again, from a betting perspective, you can potentially start to understand why Ferreira's the favourite. Maybe he should just not be that big of a favourite, but he's also not a million miles off. So yeah, it's a strange fight from a betting perspective, and it's also an intriguing fight from a stylistic perspective as well. Like, striking, I think Diego Ferreira is going to be at the receiving end of volume here. I think King Green's still going to have more volume, but Diego Ferreira hits hard, and I think he's going to hit cleaner and harder than Green. And then when it comes to the wrestling side, I think Green is probably the better wrestler, and from a defensive perspective, that's maybe going to matter a little bit here. Like, I don't think Green's going to shoot takedowns on Diego Ferreira, because from a jiu-jitsu perspective, like, Ferreira is miles better than Green. Like, he's a legitimate BJJ black belt. So I'd be surprised if Green's shooting the takedowns, because that's playing into Ferreira's world. So I think it's going to be Ferreira shooting the takedowns on Green. And again, I think he might get one or two as well. And I'm just unsure how that actually goes down. Does Ferreira actually keep him down, or does Green get back up to the feet? So it's one of these fights where I feel like I'm going backwards and forwards on, because on one side, you've got the volume from Green, which is one of the attributes that I do favour over most other attributes when a fighter that I know is going to put a ton of volume on the opponent. But if that's happening, Ferreira is going to be shooting takedowns. And if he can get Green down a few times, get on top of Green, I just think Green might be a little bit stuck with Ferreira on top. That's how highly I rate Ferreira's topside grappling. So, yeah, look, I wouldn't be shocked to see a King Green win. Really, really wouldn't. But I do think that Ferreira, when you look at the biggest gap in skill in a fight with all the disciplines within MMA, I think the grappling's the biggest gap in skill, and that's on Ferreira's side. So that's the way that I'm leaning because of that. So for those reasons, I'm picking Diego Ferreira to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Gerald Meerschaert versus Michal Oleksiejczuk. And look, Mr. Pay-Per-View himself, Gerald Meerschaert, he seems to be on all these big cards. Like, the UFC love him, and I understand why. Like, he's one of these, like I said about Dricus Du Plessis earlier, he's one of these awkward fighters that is highly skilled but doesn't look as pretty to the eye. And Meerschaert's got a super dangerous submission game as well. So, again, he's one of those fighters that can get beat up for 2 rounds and then find a submission and win. And, the UFC love that type of fighter, so I understand why, he seems to be on all these big cards. Look, maybe I'm wrong. It's just, from memory, it seems like all these pay-per-views includes a Gerald Meerschaert on the card. And then Michal Oleksiejczuk, he's a fighter that I loved when he came into the UFC. He had a bit of a dip. He's had some wins again. And I just feel there's a little bit of inconsistency with Oleksiejczuk. Like, I don't know how true this is, but there was rumours going around a number of fights ago that Oleksiejczuk his head probably wasn't in the game anymore. Maybe he had one foot out the door looking to get out of MMA, but then he won. And I don't know, like, I just don't know where Oleksiejczuk's at. But the one thing I will say is, look, this is a very stylistically interesting fight, because on one side you've got Oleksiejczuk that's going to be the better striker, more dangerous striker, and has got every chance of knocking Meerschaert out. But on the flip side, you've got Meerschaert, who's absolutely the better grappler, and if he takes Oleksiejczuk down, he's got every chance of submitting Oleksiejczuk or landing ground and pound and finishing him. Like, the weakness of Oleksiejczuk is the grappling, and the weakness of Meerschaert is the striking. So, we've got what's built up to be a very interesting fight stylistically. And look, I could absolutely see a world in where Oleksiejczuk puts it on Meerschaert early, hits him to the body, because again, this is another thing, like, Oleksiejczuk does mix, and he does mix his levels up really well, rips to the head, rips to the body, and I love these types of fighters. So it wouldn't shock me if Oleksiejczuk is hurting Meerschaert to the head, Meerschaert covers up, rips to the body, hurts Meerschaert to the body, Meerschaert starts turtling up against the cage, and Oleksiejczuk runs through him and finishes the fight. Like that, I could see a world in where that happens. But on the flip side here, I could also see a world in where Oleksiejczuk's putting a lot of pressure on Meerschaert, and what that does Meerschaert's job for him, because Meerschaert wants Oleksiejczuk to, he wants the fight to get close so he can get a hold of Oleksiejczuk and put him down. And if Oleksiejczuk is pushing forwards and forwards, remember the boxing range is where Oleksiejczuk's better, and inside that boxing range, all it takes is Meerschaert to take one step forward, and then he's in a clinch position where he can try and take Oleksiejczuk down. So essentially what Oleksiejczuk is going to be doing is Meerschaert's work for him in regards to that distance being closed. Oleksiejczuk's not going to sit on the outside firing strikes from far out. That's just not his style. So Again, I can also see a world where Meerschaert gets a hold of Oleksiejczuk, takes him down, and just drowns him on the mat, and maybe finds a choke as Oleksiejczuk's standing back up, or, you know, maybe Oleksiejczuk shows his back and Meerschaert sticks his hooks in and, you know, gets a rear naked choke. Like, I could see a world in that where that happens as well. So it's a very binary fight, and again, like, Meerschaert's the underdog, but also, like, I don't know, when it comes to trust, I just feel like I trust Meerschaert a little bit more, even if it means taking a beating to finish late on. I kind of trust him that little bit more. So, and he's the underdog side in a fight that I think it could go absolutely either way. So, yeah, for those reasons, I'm picking Gerald Meerschaert to win this fight. And in the next fight, another pay-per-view, this time Queen. We've got Jessica Andrade versus Lupita Godinez. Now, again, Jessica Andrade is a fighter that always seems to be on these pay-per-views. Again, the UFC love her. Super aggressive, super violent. Will always look to take her opponents out. And again, she's one of these fighters that, no disrespect, is on that decline. Like, she's not the same fighter as what she was 5 years ago. But that seems to be, right now at least anyway, more towards the top of the division. Like, she's not going to be competitive with the top 5 anymore, which again, you can understand. But Lupita Godinez is not that type of fighter that's at the top of the division. She's just not there. So I think this is going to be an ultra competitive fight. I think Jessica Andrade has got a real good chance of being able to put on a really good performance here. Like, I'm not saying Godinez is a bad fighter. Like, she's got good striking herself. She comes from that wrestling background, a wrestling family. So she's got that in her back pocket. But again, with the wrestling, like, yeah, Andrade can be got at and taken down and kept down. But again, that's more like your Valentina Shevchenkos of the world, which isn't Lupita Godinez. Like, I do think Lupita Godinez will shoot takedowns. I think she might get 1 or 2. But I just don't see a world in where Lupita Godinez is just on top of Andrade for like minutes at a time, with Andrade just not being able to do anything. I think Andrade will be able to get back up to her feet. And also on the flip side, I think Lupita Godinez is going to go into this fight thinking, well, yeah, the wrestling's in my game plan, but maybe my wrestling might be plan B. Like, I think I'm a better striker than Jessica Andrade. That's what I think Godinez is going to be thinking in this fight. And I think Godinez is going to go in there in the mindset of, I'm going to outstrike Andrade and make a point. Kind of feel she's that type of fighter, and I just don't think that she's going to get at Andrade striking in the way that she might think. And I think that wrestling plan B will come into play. But again, when you're looking at, you know, level of competition, who they fought, and now they're fighting down in competition because they're no longer in and around, you know, competitive at the top, I think Andrade has got roots to victory. I think she's the better mixed martial artist than Godinez. Yes, Godinez has got good abilities in specific skill sets in, you know, the wrestling, for example, like I've already mentioned. But I just think the fight is going to be based on more than just Godinez shooting a takedown and getting Andrade down. I think Andrade is going to be able to make Godinez work. If she is taken down, get back up to her feet. And then while they're striking, I think Andrade hits harder. Maybe Godinez might have more output from a volume perspective, but Andrade is going to be the aggressive one, winging bombs and putting it on Godinez. And I think this is one of these fights where Godinez is on her way up and Andrade is on her way down, but Andrade has got that much experience at the highest level of the sport. I think it's going to show in this fight, and that does, you know, you can put a lot of stock in that, because having that top level experience, even if you are on your way down on a bit of a decline, once you start fighting lower in the division, these opponents that you're fighting against just don't have that level of quality and experience at the highest level of the sport, and that's why and when it matters. So for those reasons, I am actually going to side with Andrade here. I'm picking Jessica Andrade to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Alexander Hernandez versus Chase Hooper. Now, this is another really interesting fight. I definitely don't agree with Chase Hooper being like a minus 300 favourite here, but he should definitely be favoured. Like, I don't think that's any question. If he was a pick'em or an underdog, then everyone would just steam his betting line, including us, to probably where it is right now anyway. But yeah, I just don't know. I think the line's a little wide, but is the value on the underdog in Hernandez? I'm not sure. Like, Alexander Hernandez is somebody that we've bet on multiple times. We've had a couple of wins, but we've also lost as well. And then we've bet against him, and it seems every time we bet against him, we do really well as well. So Hernandez is one of these really inconsistent fighters, trades wins and losses all the time. And to be honest with you, like, he was massively hyped once upon a time when he came into the UFC on short notice and knocked out Beneil Dariush in devastating fashion. And I think he got sort of like painted as this fighter that he was never going to be. And
again, that's not his fault. Like, he came in and did a job, and everybody's, putting him in this category and that category, and it probably would have served him better to have lost against Dariush and have that nice build-up, because he got put on such a platform that he just wasn't able to perform at that level. And again, that was a while ago now. He's now back fighting where he should be fighting, and like I say, he's trading wins and losses because the fighters that he's fighting are also good fighters as well. You've got Chase Hooper here who, a few years ago, everyone was thinking, well, how long is he going to last in the UFC? Because his grappling was good. We always knew that. But his striking was so bad that he was like pulling guard and falling over and asking opponents to get in his guard. And like even the most basic of grapplers that weren't predominant grapplers in the UFC were absolutely lighting him up. But since then, like, look, his last loss was Steve Garcia, and look at what Steve Garcia's done since then. Like, Chase Hooper's striking's improving dramatically from fight to the point where, he was putting Vyacheslav Borshev down, on the feet striking, and Borshev is a lifelong kickboxer. So, like, Chase Hooper has got good striking now. He's got sneaky power as well, and then this jiu-jitsu game he's got is elite, and that's why I do think he should be favoured against Alexander Hernandez. But Hernandez has got, he's got that short, stocky frame. He's got the ability to defend takedowns. Like, his anti-wrestling's good. In fact, his offensive wrestling's good as well. I just don't think he's going to take Hooper down. I think Hooper, sort that will that he's got in the jiu-jitsu game, I think he's going to prevent fighters from taking him down. So that's one less thing that he needs to worry about. But from a striking perspective, I think Hernandez is going to have to get in at Chase Hooper striking. But he's got to be very careful because he can't close the distance all the way or get too close, because Hooper's going to get a hold of him and try and take him down. I think it's an interesting fight stylistically. But again, I wouldn't be surprised if Hernandez is closing the distance to put it on Hooper, and Hooper just lands like a counter hook or, a counter straight punch down the middle and hurts Hernandez, or at least gets his respect to the point where Hooper now starts to do okay from a striking perspective. And that's why I'm almost landing on Hooper here, because when you break it all down and look at the different disciplines, you look at striking, well, I think that's now quite even. If you spoke to me a couple of years ago, Hernandez absolutely tortures Hooper on the feet. But Hooper's improved that much. I think the striking's very, very close, to the point where I'm not sure if there's a massive edge either way. Well, there's definitely not a massive edge, and I don't think there's any sort of edge either way. I just think it's close. Then you look at the wrestling. I think Hernandez has got the slightly better wrestling, but again, Hooper's got this ability to take fighters down, so I think he can get Alexander Hernandez down. And then when you look at the grappling, well, yeah, Hooper's in a totally different planet than Alexander Hernandez, so that's why I'm landing on Hooper. I think the minus 300 line is a little bit wide, probably will close the longer the fight week goes on, but yeah, I think Hooper wins this fight, man. So for those reasons, I'm picking Chase Hooper to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Edson Barboza versus Drakkar Klose. Now, if the bout order is correct here, and Barboza is the fourth fight on the card, which would put him as the first prelim of the card, that's pretty sad, man. Like, Barboza's always been a pay-per-view portion fighter, co-main event, main event, and yeah, it's look, like I've said multiple times on this card, it's just what happens in this sport. You can't be in your prime forever, no matter if you are an elite. Every elite fighter is going to have that downfall, and that's just not this sport. Not just this sport, sorry. Like, that's every sport. That's football, that's tennis, that's rugby, that's American football, baseball, basketball. Every prime athlete is always going to end up down this path towards the end of the career. And yeah, it's kind of sad to see Barboza essentially being the first fight on the prelim portion of a card, but that's where we're at. The good news for Barboza is I think he's got a really good opponent in front of him in regards to stylistically and, a winnable fight. Like, again, Barboza, just like I mentioned on multiple fighters on this card, he's just not going to be competitive with the top of the division anymore. So what the UFC have done is they've given him a fight where he's fighting down. Probably for the first time in many, many years. Drakkar Klose, I wouldn't even say he's like massively on his way up, but like Barboza's just been given a mid-level fighter. And again, I don't mean that disrespectfully, because a mid-level fighter at the level of the UFC is still a world-class fighter, but it's just not the type of opponent that Barboza's used to fighting. And then when you look at skill for skill, like, I think Barboza is a way better striker than Drakkar Klose. Yes, Drakkar Klose can hit, and he can hit hard, and that's something Barboza's got to be careful of. At this point in his career, he can be stunned, he can be knocked out. So I think Klose, the best thing for Klose to do in this fight, in my opinion, is close the distance, shoot a takedown. If successful, great. If not successful, get Barboza back against the cage and just start landing on him. But again, we've seen fighters try to do that against Barboza. Barboza just landed a knee up the middle as they've come in and sparked them out cold. It's like Barboza's still super dangerous. And I think for Drakkar Klose, his best way of winning this fight is to not go toe-to-toe with Barboza striking, because he's going to get chewed up. I think he's got to close the distance, bomb on Barboza hard in boxing range with boxing, and then mix in takedowns. But Barboza's got a decent takedown defense game. He can get back up to his feet. Drakkar Klose isn't the most dominant guy from an offensive grappling perspective. And then if he's closing the distance that close to Barboza, where he's coming in and trying to land big bombs, well, he's going to be susceptible to getting hit on as he's closing the distance, which we've seen Barboza hit these reaction knees, reaction kicks as fighters are coming in. He's still going to be elite from a technical perspective. So, yeah, I think it's a good fight for Barboza. Sure, he's not fighting the top of the division anymore, but I think the UFC have matched here in a way where I believe that Barboza's got a very winnable fight ahead of him. And for those reasons, I'm picking Edson Barboza to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Nursulton Ruziboev versus Bryan battle. Now, the UFC, man, they do this to me every single time. Like, if you go back historically and listen to all my Bryan battle podcasts, I think I've picked against him every single fight, and I've bet against him a lot of times as well, and I haven't won many of those bets. So it's definitely something that plays on my mind. But then the UFC give Bryan Battle another fight where I actually really like the opponent. And look, Bryan Battle's clearly a good fighter. He wins a lot in the UFC. He's a fighter that is improving, and a fighter that I probably don't give enough credit to, if I'm being totally honest to myself. It's just these individual fights. Like, I don't see Bryan Battle fights as a whole. Like, all I do is go fight by fight. And Bryan Battle's fighting, Nursulton Ruziboev, and I think Battle could beat him, but it's also a fight that I think Ruziboev's going to enjoy as well. Like, yeah, it's one of these where, I really don't have anything against Bryan Battle. I promise you I don't. It's just when I'm seeing these individual fights, I'm kind of liking the opponent on every single one of them. And I'm the same here. Like, Ruziboev spends a lot of time with the guys at Philly, Daniel Gracie gym, with, Andrei Petrosky and Pat Sabatini and Sean Brady. I can't believe Sean Brady was the third one I mentioned in that list. But, those real high-level wrestling guys with elite-level jiu-jitsu. But then now it seems like he's training at another gym, or at least cross-training at another gym as well, with the likes of Khamzat Chimaev. I think it's a new gym as well. I don't remember the name. It's like Jackson Gym or something like that with a double X. Again, it's not a gym that I've recognised before, so I think it might be a new gym that's attracting, some of these really high-level fighters. I know Chimaev's been doing a lot of work there. Ruziboev, I see, has been working there as well, and I've seen it with other fighters over the last few weeks as well. So I know that Ruziboev's super well trained, and even from a skill set perspective, he's always someone that I've liked. Super tall, super long for the division, hits hard, got a crazy submission game. So he's a fighter that I really like. Now, it is one of those fights where I could see Battle running through him, because Ruziboev can be a little bit, I wouldn't say inconsistent, but he's got a good offensive skill set, but defensively he seems to lack a little bit. And anybody that's got defensive flaws, I think Battle can really thrive against. So that's what's going for Bryan Battle in this fight. But on the flip side, like I say, the offense of Ruziboev is so good. He's going to be improving from fight to fight. He's going to be an awkward fighter for Battle to fight in general as well. And you make one slight mistake against Ruziboev and he's either laying you out or, snatching up a submission somewhere. So, again, I just feel like it's one of these 50-50 fights that I'm really torn between, flipping between back and forth. One minute I'm on Ruziboev, the next minute I'm on Bryan Battle. So in these types of fights, they ultimately, finalise that pick and prediction from which one's the underdog. And of course, that's Ruziboev in this fight. The betting market does respect Bryan Battle, and I respect the fact that there's that respect there. So yeah, look, when it comes to this type of fight where I'm so torn and I could see the fighter winning and in multiple different ways on either side, I'm just going to bring it down to the betting line as the way that I resort to that pick and prediction. So for those reasons, I'm picking Nursulton Ruziboev to win this fight.
And in the next fight, we've got Karine Silva versus Dione Barboza. Now, Barboza's took this fight on short notice. I believe it was Silva versus JJ Aldrich. I actually think Silva's got a more difficult fight here. Like, Aldrich is good. She's got that dog in her. She's definitely got good hands and a good all-round style. But Barboza, I think, is more in a prime, a little bit more dangerous right now. And is just going to put up a better fight with the style of Karine Silva. So, look, Silva's a fighter that's got wild striking. She'll be super aggressive, but likes to strike her way into a position where she can get into a clinch, take her opponent down. And she's got super, like, slick, dangerous, quick grappling. Like, there's moments where, you know, she's got the takedown and you're thinking, right, she's going to now go from position to position. And then suddenly she's whipping out a submission out of nowhere and finishing it. So I think that Silva, although, like I say, I think she might have got a more difficult opponent in Barboza. The flip side to her, though, is she's got an opponent that is probably going to be slightly less prepared. Even though Barboza will be in the gym every day, you know, there's a difference between being in the gym every day and being in a fight camp at professional level, at this level in the UFC. So she'll have got a more underprepared fighter, but likely a, you know, more of a dangerous fighter for her own skill set. But I think this is a fight for Silva to win. I think Barboza, although she does pose a threat, good everywhere, good striking, wrestling, grappling, I just think it's one of these fighters where one fighter slightly edges the other in every discipline. I think Karine Silva's going to be the slightly better striker, the slightly better wrestler, or at least takedown artist, the slightly better grappler. And I just feel in those types of fights, it's going to be difficult for Barboza to put a real stamp on this fight for herself. Like, she's going to have moments, I think it's going to be competitive, but to put a stamp on the rounds, like at least 2 out of 3 rounds, I think is going to be difficult. So for those reasons, I'm picking Karine Silva to win this fight. And in the next fight, the final fight to break down, we've actually got the Ultimate Fighter 33 flyweight finale between Alibi Idris versus Joseph Morales. Now, Joseph Morales, this is his second stint in the UFC, even though he's not got that UFC contract because it's a tough finale. But if he was to get into the UFC or even being on a UFC card, you know, he's back again. He had a stint the last time, he went 1-2, the UFC released him, but those 2 losses were against Davison Figueiredo and Eric Shelton. Now, the Davison Figueiredo one you can absolutely write off and forgive, because at the time we probably didn't know it, but Davison Figueiredo went on to being one of the best fighters on planet Earth, a flyweight champion, one of the best in the bantamweight division. Now he's moved up in weight, so you can definitely give a pass for that Figueiredo loss. It's the split decision loss to Eric Shelton that I think might have been, you know, the final straw. But also from a timing perspective, and I could be very wrong here, but it feels like maybe Joseph Morales was cut along with a lot of other flyweights when the UFC had announced a number of years ago that they were sort of withdrawing the flyweight division from, you know, the weight divisions within the UFC, and then realised that actually it probably wasn't the best decision to make, and then brought the flyweight division back. But by the time they brought it back, they cut and axed off a lot of flyweights to the point where, look, we're ending the division, we're pulling it from the UFC roster, so we're going to start cutting the fighters one by one. They cut like about 10 really good fighters and then decided it wasn't the right decision to pull the roster and to pull the division, and then continued the flyweight division, and now it only had half the fighters in and they've got to rebuild it. And I think Joseph Morales may have been within that cut of the fighters that got released there, but I could be wrong. But yeah, look, he went 1-2. The Figueiredo loss is what it is. The Eric Shelton loss wasn't a great look, but you know, now he's back. He's done the Ultimate Fighter. He's into the finale, and he's got Alibi Idris on the other side from Kazakhstan, who looks like a real talent, if I'm being honest. There isn't a betting line out right now for Idris, so this is a prediction based on me not knowing what the line is going to be. And if you put me on the spot and asking me to predict a line, look, I think Idris is going to be around -250, give or take, you know, 10 cent either side, and I think it probably is going to end up closing at about -300. That's my gut feeling anyway. Like, Idris, when you watch him, he's really good. He's got good pressure, good volume, good balance as well. The balance is really good. Like, it's not something that I normally, you know, sort of overly focus on or notice within fighters, but the balance is outstanding. He also has really good flashy kicks and knees as well, which again, that comes with a good balance. So
yeah, he's a fighter that's got good volume. He's got good power in the short range. He's got flying knee knockouts, spinning wheel kick knockouts, and he's just a super entertaining fighter. Now, from a wrestling and grappling perspective, as you can imagine, being at that side of the world in Kazakhstan, he can wrestle and grapple. Doesn't really choose to go to it too much from an offensive perspective, but defensively, he can defend takedowns, good hips, good recognition of the takedown coming in as well. And if he is taken down, he's not laying two shoulders on the mat, he's straight on a hip, looking to better his position, get a hold of your leg, and try and either hit a single leg himself or use that single leg grab to not the reverse position, use it to stand back up to his feet. So, yeah, Adiris is a fighter that defensively wrestling and grappling he's good, and it needs it to be defensively good because of how good he is as a striker. But it's also super important in this fight with Morales, because Morales is a fighter that's got some tricky takedowns and some tricky grappling himself. So Adiris, from a stylistic perspective, just needs to stay away from getting taken down too much. And if he is taken down, I'm not convinced Morales controls him for minutes on end enough to steal rounds. I think, again, if Adiris is if he does get taken down, which again Morales is going to have to work hard for, if he doesn't get takedowns, the fight's going to be won and lost on the feet. If he does get takedowns, I think Adiris is going to be able to get back up to his feet, and the fight is won and lost on the feet. So I think whichever way you look at it, the fight's going to be won and lost within the striking. And I think Adiris' volume, his pressure, is going to be more than enough to steal 2 rounds, probably all 3 on a judge's scorecard. And if it doesn't go to a judge's scorecard, wouldn't surprise me for Adiris to catch something and knock Morales out either. So for those reasons, I'm picking Alibi Adiris to win this fight and become the Ultimate Fighter 33 flyweight winner. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you for everybody tuning in. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Podcast, please jump over to YouTube as well. There on YouTube, you can subscribe and like the video, which helps the YouTube algorithms push our video out to more people, which then in turn helps MMA Play 365 and the YouTube channel itself as well, helps the channel grow. And of course, within YouTube, you can leave a comment on the video, so you can tell me who you're betting on, tell me who we disagree with, tell me who your favorite underdog is. If you're building a parlay, tell me your best, 3 or 4 leg parlay. Any type of conversation. It is me that replies to the comments. I always try my best every single week. I am busy with other areas of the sport, but I always try my best to get back to every single comment. So leave a comment. Again, that helps YouTube algorithms as well, so I always really appreciate that. And finally, one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, which I'm sure you are going to want to do for this stacked UFC 319 pay-per-view card, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. Every package includes the professional handicapper betting advice and Baze AI, our UFC prediction software. We don't separate the packages. Everything's super affordable, so you can win your money back that you spend with us as quickly as you possibly can, so you can make profit on top of your bets, which is absolutely crucial to a service that provides betting advice. And it's all, like I say, super affordable. It's $5 for one event, it's $10 a month, or for an entire year, it's just $99 for every single UFC card within that year. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.